if you want to go after better companies, after better compensation or other markets, you need to step your game up. So you need to learn those things.
Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of the iOS Lead Essentials podcast. Here we discuss the strategies in your journey to become a complete iOS senior developer. My name is Bogdan. I'm a senior iOS developer and lead instructor in the iOS Lead Essentials program, the online program for iOS developers who want to become complete senior developers. Today, our special guest is Penna, a senior iOS developer from Brazil who joined the iOS Lead Essentials program and got a very good offer with relocation included and a significant income increase. So join us to learn how he did it, and there you can achieve it too. Hello, Penna.
Hello, thank you for having me.
First of all, I want to say it out loud. I admire people that have the courage to move to a new country. I think that's at least challenging, let's put it like that. And I never had the courage to do it yet. So kudos for that.
Thank you.
So can you tell us how long have you been an iOS developer?
I had to calculate it again. I think now it's 8 years.
What did you do before that?
I actually got into development through game development. I graduated in computer games. Before that, I studied game design. I wanted to do concept art, and then I found out that programming is more my vibe. So I did the shift from mobile games to mobile apps.
What did you use to write those games in?
Usually inside game engines like Unity or Unreal, mostly that. Then iOS development with Sprite Kit, a
Oh,
little bit of Scenic Kit, um, yeah, and then apps with UI Kit back then.
cool. And how'd you find out about the iOS Lead Essentials program?
So I reached this point in my career where I wasn't happy with the situation I was at. I was already a lead developer in Brazil, but it didn't felt right, like something was missing. So I started searching for alternatives, for other ways to develop, for other ways to build software, avoiding some pitfalls that I lived in my company and other experience that I had in the past. So while you're researching and looking for resources, I found a professional iOS engineering series on YouTube, and that was my first contact with the whole essential developer community.
And what were some of these pitfalls you mentioned?
Mostly, I would say things related to software quality. The biggest problem was having that feeling that you build something for a couple of years or even shorter than that, and you reach a point where it's actually easier to rewrite everything. And that felt too wrong. Like, um, if you are building something, you are moving fast, you should be able to continue moving fast. That was my
Right.
what I believed when I decided to go back to studying. An important aspect I would say is, since I come from game development, there is not that much proper computer science stuff during the graduation there. So I would say I come from a background where we just do things, make them work. And that's the major point. Like, oh, okay, it's ready. Let's ship it. It's probably something that happens a lot in the game industry. That's why we see a lot of bugs in games, and also why most of the time when you release a sequel, you don't reuse almost anything from the previous game. It's easier to rebuild, so maybe that's the norm there. Um, but yeah, and why would we come to that situation where it's easier to rewrite, mostly because you have a lot of code that you forgot what it does. You don't have tests covering it. There's no documentation. That classic situation, the guy who wrote this is gone, or even worse, you were the guy that
It's
wrote
new.
that 2 years ago, and you have no idea what it does. So yeah, you were left with a code base with a lot of coupled uh, things, a lot of shared state, a lot of hidden dependencies. And when you need to implement something, you first need to, it reached that point where, oh, we need to implement a new feature. Okay, let me look at the code to see if we can do it. And it shouldn't be like that. It wasn't in the beginning when you first
Yeah.
wrote the thing. So why is it too coupled now?
Yeah, it's like with every feature, the code base becomes more and more rigid. So every time you have to add something new, you're almost like it's almost impossible. Like
Yeah,
the feature
absolutely.
should take like 1 hour, but I need to refactor for 2 days before that. Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I think we're fortunate enough to have seen this in some code bases, because if it's like the regular iOS app, that's a short-lived repo, you maybe don't get to see this problem that often. Whereas if you work on a long-term project, then this becomes more and more obvious over time. And I mean, yeah, Apple helps in some way because you always have a new technology, so rewriting is covered with good reasoning. Like, yeah, we can rewrite in Swift an old Objective-C code base or use some new APIs and everything. But the reason is not that, is this problem that you very well explained of just getting to a point where the code base does not support changes anymore. And it's you're probably breaking something anyway when you're adding a new feature. uh,
Absolutely. And then your client is the one to find out.
yeah,
Sometimes it's not even your QA team if you have one, but it's definitely not your test suite who's the one that should be catching those
yeah,
things.
yeah. So that's unfortunate, but I think that happens a lot. uh, that's in my opinion, that's the common approach. If you haven't learned how a better way to do this, that's kind of how you do it, because you don't know any other way, so you keep doing as best you can, and you reach that point where it's unmanageable. And then the architects and the seniors say, okay, we got to rewrite this. The problem is next time you rewrite it, you make the same mistakes, right? Because you have the same skills. uh,
Absolutely. The weirdest thing about my last experience before the course was I joined the company to rewrite their app. And by the time I left, almost 2 years later, it reached the point, okay, we need to rewrite this. And yeah, that
a full
shouldn't be.
cycle.
Yeah, and it might be, it might not be obvious for that many people, especially if you are not staying the long term inside the same company. If your average span in a company is like 1 year or shorter than that, you are probably not experiencing those
Yeah,
problems. You're just blaming the developers that came before
yeah,
you, and you are
exactly.
not seeing that you are the one also doing that.
Totally. I guess it's also that point where you see the code base starting to, I don't know, produce a lot of bugs of regressions, crashes. You see that, I don't know, decrease in quality of the produced software. Um,
Yeah, and depending on the product, the last product I worked on that company was a white label app. So we had, I would say, massive view controllers with a lot of if else statements to toggle features, or, oh, this feature is particular for one client of the white label, so we can only enable that there. And sometimes changing something or implementing a new feature for a new client could break a lot of stuff and you don't know about it.
yeah,
Like, and then you'll have, when you have clear if else statements, it's manageable. Like, oh, this is only for X client, this is only for Y. But then you got a new client that wants both features, and you never tested both of them working at the same time.
Yeah.
So it can happen, and it's not manageable.
Yeah. Like a lot of I've seen a lot of things go bad when you have these conditional conditional on features um, all over the place, and sometimes you can, I don't know, it can look right at each site, but overall the logic applied overall the app, it's not right, or there can be many issues there. And by the way, good luck testing that manually when you have white label variations of your app. So that's exponentially increasing the complexity to test every time. So yeah, pretty tough one. So yeah, I understand. So you had all these issues. Most of them I can relate to in my career as well. So had similar issues when I thought like, maybe this can be right. Like there's got to be something we can do, especially when you get more experience. Like you said, like maybe you're the most experienced developer in your team, like the lead or the senior, and people expect you to come up with solutions to these problems, and you maybe can't get them.
Yeah, what I feel happen in a lot of companies, at least that's how I felt, being a leader. I would say I was the leader there because I was the guy with more time working in that app. So I was the one that knew how some stuff worked and hoped that part of that worked the way I thought it did. So yeah, I just became a lead not because of talent or skills, but oh, I'm the guy that can fix things, can build things, and that's it. It's not that satisfying, but it's a career path.
Totally. It's just that nowadays I see this very dangerous situation, because if there's just one guy that knows a particular area of the code base, or there's some smells there, right? People are afraid to change the code. They're probably because there are no tests to back that up, because they're sure they will make a mistake. So, and I think that thing just doesn't scale, because even if with that situation, I'm sure yourself as the expert in 3 months, 6 months, you have less and less knowledge about that component, that module. So you're bound to make the same mistakes. Like that thing of having one expert per area doesn't really work well. At least I haven't seen that work well.
Yeah, it might work on short-lived applications. Like if you're building something that you will throw away 6 months later, then okay, that might be a path. I
Yeah,
decided that was not for me.
yeah, excellent, excellent. So yeah, just to recap, you were at the point where, yeah, I guess you also couldn't tell me if I'm mistaken, but I assume you weren't making much progress from a technical point of view in your career, as well as finding all these issues at work.
If we go into detail on what the situation looked like, since the code base was too rigid and a lot of people didn't want to touch it, so, we started to lose some talent in the company. It reached the point where I was the one doing most of the maintenance. I was also maintaining the microservices and some things related to the Android app, since I was leading the mobile chapter there.
Right.
So yeah, I drifted away from iOS. I learned a lot about management and leadership. That's nice. But at the same time, I also learned by doing. So a lot of hiccups in the way. Um, but yeah, it reached a point where I wasn't progressing on iOS. And at the same time, uh, my son was born. And I decided that I wanted to move to another country. I didn't want to raise my son in Brazil, and I have a brother living in Germany, and I said, okay, he always tells me amazing things about that, about Germany, and that would be a nice place. Um, and when I started to look for positions and looking at the job description and seeing that it's not just that leather soup of MVVM, MVP, and that's it. They are actually concerned about concepts that I don't even know what they are. Like, uh, I remember now looking back that I didn't have enough technical skill to talk about dependency injection with one of my engineers who were really good at it. So yeah, I wasn't progressing, and now I had a new goal that I wasn't able to achieve at the moment.
That's nice when you can crystallize such a goal, so you know where you're going. Was that something to consider when you decided to join the program, trying to fill that gap of knowledge?
Absolutely, absolutely. I remember why and the exact moment I decided to join the program. So first, when I decided, okay, I need to study, I need to learn the proper way of writing software. Um, uh, I followed the professional engineering iOS series, and I remember one episode, or I believe it's season 3, episode 2, where Caio and Mike were working on rewriting a UI kit screen into Swift UI.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is they started that app 2 years before Swift UI was announced. And at the time, if I thought, okay, I have a UI view controller and I need to rewrite this screen in Swift UI, I would have to rewrite everything. That's the only way I knew how
Yeah.
to do things. And in that episode, they write the Swift UI implementation without running the app. And that is really different. Like it's completely different from how I was used to building something. And then they just plug it and it worked. And it felt magical. Like there is no
Yeah.
better way to describe that.
Yeah, it is. Nice. I remember also watching that series, and many things there are just magical, but also this one was incredible. Just that keeping the UI at the outer layer, like it's just like the final detail. How we wanted this to look like. Okay, maybe it's UI kit, maybe it's Swift UI, maybe it's app kit or whatever. Like it didn't spill into any of the other layers of the framework, and like it was,
Yeah.
yeah, totally different than the way we used to write iOS code, right? So
Yeah. And if you look back at the first season where they decided to not couple with UI image, you think at that moment watching that episode, I was thinking, no, that's too much. Like
yeah,
that's over engineering. Like you were not using UI image. Why are you doing that? Like, okay, generics using data. It should be. It's nice from an academic point of view, but it's not practical. And then when you realize that they did that before Swift UI was announced, and that helped to switch the framework, then you start to see a lot of value in keeping your code base
yeah,
decoupled from frameworks.
it is. So that was your trigger, let's say.
Yeah,
Okay. Did you had any second thoughts about joining, or
absolutely. I actually didn't join on the first cohort that I could. Um, since I had already left the company, I was living with my savings. And paying for the course was a huge investment, especially when you consider when I convert to Brazilian reais. So yeah, that point in the series was what actually sold the course to me. Like, yeah, it summarized everything that I wanted to be able to achieve with whatever code base I worked. Okay, we need to change something as intrinsic as the UI framework if you were doing the standard way, the way I was doing before. Like UI kit was a huge part of it, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, I need to learn how to do it. And having a program focused on iOS development for that, yeah, I knew, okay, this is the step I need to take to get where I want in my career.
So then you decided to join.
Yes.
So you mentioned you were off work during that time. How long did that go on for?
Yeah. After I left the company, since I was a lead, I had a pretty big compensation. But since at the same time I was responsible for a lot of stuff, I didn't have time to live my life. So I couldn't enjoy the compensation. I was working more than I should. Um, a quick comment just to grasp the situation. There was an instance where we had a pretty serious problem in production, and since I was the only guy that knew the microservices for the mobile app, I went to the company during a public holiday, and I spent 26 hours straight there.
Wow.
Yeah. My manager spent 36 hours, and the director I didn't see live in the company. So yeah, I was in a situation at the company where every money I was making was just savings. So I had some money to sustain myself while studying, and that was my main goal. So I would say I went from 8 hours work to 8 hours studying every day, starting in the YouTube series, then adding some books, then joining the course, going through all the lessons.
Nice. So you went full on board on the program. What was your process of going through the material? Like how did you manage that?
Since I also have experience with teaching, back in game development, I was a game development instructor. I had some understanding of everyone has a different way of learning,
Yeah.
and I really learn. I can learn through consuming content. So watching videos and listening to podcasts is something that really works for me. If I'm focused, it's not something like, oh yeah, I would do that while playing video games. No, I would do that while doing the dishes, maybe. But looking at videos with the code is something that really works for me. So that would be my main goal. Um, but I also enjoy a lot of tangential learning. Tangential learning is when you are studying something or reading about something, and there's a link or something that takes you to a separate subject, and then you start reading about that.
Yeah.
That really helps to connect and solidify. And the articles in the course have a lot of references to books or to articles or things like
Yeah.
that, or to the documentation. So a lesson that might be a video of 1 hour with a reading of 15 minutes could become a 3 day dive into the
Yeah.
documentation of, core data. Let's read about it. Other things that I would find myself doing in the program, and since I was spending, I would say around 8 hours, but it's really difficult to study for long period of time. But you, at the same time, you are able to work 8 hours a day, so you should be able to study. But yeah, it's probably the cognitive load is a little bit more intense when you are
Yeah.
learning new things than practicing what you already know. So in some days, I would not be able to do 8 hours. I would uh, strive for 4 hours, but a minimum of two. Even if I had to take big pauses or during some days where it was really difficult to concentrate, I would go with the Pomodoro technique, and but not just 25 minutes, 5 minutes. No, if it's not working, let's change the time. So 30 minutes work, 1 hour pause if it's what takes, so I can concentrate. It's
Right.
best. It's better to have 30 minutes really focused, and then do something else and then come back after some time to look at it again than not looking at all, or looking and not learning. So
Because it's about quality.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. It doesn't matter if you are just listening to the lessons in quick succession while not paying attention. So
exactly.
like maybe you were learning something, but you were not focused there. And another thing that I thought was really interesting and important in my learning process in the lessons was the comment section. Um, I've read most of the comment section in most of the lessons, and okay, it sounds weird. It's like trying to read the comments on social media, but you are actually looking at questions that you might not have asked yourself. Uh,
Yeah,
some some might be obvious. Some questions you might have had, and they are explained in the program, and you could answer that. And it's a really nice exercise to try to answer that in your mind. Like if
yeah,
someone asked you, what would you say? But in some cases, there are things that you didn't even consider, and then you
yeah,
have a nice answer with extra information, with extra links to other threads, and you can continue researching a lot from there.
yeah. Yeah, it's totally. I think this is super valuable having, like, I think in our community, having people from so many backgrounds. I mean, we all do iOS, but our backgrounds are so different. Uh, then you get these unique perspectives on some things, and they're just like you said. When I was looking at some of the comments, I was like, wow, I would never think about that. Just not the way I think. It's like a totally different point of view, and it would help me so much to I don't know, maybe sort that information and gain some new perspective on it. Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah, there is the phrase that guys love to say: "You don't know what you don't know,"
Yeah,
and the comment section is full of that. Like
yeah,
you can read there and find, oh, I didn't know that that could be a problem. Like
yeah,
I watched this lesson, but I wasn't considering multi-threading, and it might be a problem, and someone might have thought about it.
yeah.
There's so much material there.
It's that thing where, I mean, this applies to all aspects of our lives, whereas we are kind of the average of the five people we spend most of the time with, and in our professional life, you and your team, you probably have like the same conversations, the same view of things at some point. And it's really hard for a new idea to enter that flow, and for everybody to get like a fresh perspective. So I know one recommendation for learning anything is just reading books from, I don't know, now we have like all these top books on every subject, so we know which books are maybe a bit more valuable than others, but that doesn't exactly scale like that always. But still, it's a good exercise. But just getting these perspectives from different people, I think it's, at least for me, it was a game changer. I know when I started to work on open source projects, that was the first thing I noticed is these people opening and talking about issues and different use cases that I would never think about. And it was like it helped me so much understand how, I don't know, maybe how a framework or a function may be used, because it's so different when you think about it. When you're designing your own code, it's very limited. Like you see one, two use cases, and then people just can do anything with that. So it's a mind shift.
Absolutely.
I think it also comes with experience, because if you when you're at the beginning of your career, having too many perspectives can just defocus you. Like you don't know where to go. But at some point, I think we're looking for that when we get more senior.
Absolutely. Another thing, just continue on things that helped me inside of the community, as you said, the community. So having the Slack community and having people asking questions both about the program as about the challenges they are facing in their professional life, and having the time, or at least giving the effort on trying to answer that. I deeply believe that you really learn a subject when you teach it, or you when you can teach it. So trying to explain a lesson to someone who might be uh, missing a aspect of that, what a specific term means, understanding from their point of view and explaining to them in their level what they are not getting, or seeing some very different problems because someone is dealing with I don't know, they are dealing with Bluetooth devices, or they are dealing with health kit, or gRPC connections, UDP, custom protocols. You are exposed to so many different problems
Yeah.
that you will probably not face in one single company. Like,
Yeah.
unless you are
Yeah.
working in a as a contractor that
Yeah.
develops a whole variety of apps. If you are focusing in one app, it's really hard that you will both need to deal with
Yeah.
Bluetooth and HealthKit.
Yeah.
So having those questions and helping answering that, and seeing that, uh, um, I, I I guess we can go in a tangent here and talk about imposter syndrome. Uh, was feeling really bad that I was a lead developer that didn't know a lot of stuff. So seeing that I was actually able to help people was really important to me, and seeing that the answers are correct. So yeah, that really helped when joining the program.
Yeah, that's very nice. I know a lot of people struggle with that. Not many will actually say that they have these perhaps feelings of imposter syndrome or similar. And yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because yeah, I think a lot of people just, like I said, struggle to find out if they're actually that good or not. It can go both ways. I experimented more of the overconfidence, and just got a bad surprise at the end. Uh, Whereas I always thought I knew something, and then it's like, no. So it can go both ways. But yeah, it's always tough to know exactly what's your real value. And the community and all the questions in Slack as well, I think they're a huge opportunity for everyone to learn and to keep sharp, to make sure you're like polishing those knives every day. Um, that's why I try to get in as many conversations as possible, just to have this opportunity to learn. It's unique. I think, at least for me, in some steps of my career, I felt like that's the missing part, because I was, like you said, due to temporal circumstances, I was the senior or the lead just because there was no one else, and people would look up to me, and I was like, okay, where can I get more from? These people expect me to get the answers, and I always was in search for, I don't know, like a community, some mentors that I can learn from. And I think being a part of this community has given us that, as well as also access to these hero developers like Martin Fowler and uh, Ken Beck and all the classics, which we also can indirectly learn from. Uh, and yeah, it's super valuable to our careers to have all these insights. Now, we were just to close the parentheses we opened a few minutes ago. I think we were talking about your process in the program, and
Okay.
uh, yeah, we all know you finished the program. I'm just curious, at this super intense rate, of many hours per day, how long did it take? Because I know that's a kind of a common question we get.
Yeah. Uh, I would say that really deep diving into all the material that's linked in the program. So actually reading the books that are recommended, and um, if I take that into consideration, I would say that I took 4 months, something like that, to finish it once.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, there are so many books and there are so many exercises that you can practice,
Yeah.
and so much that you can do. I would say that if I were to just go through considering just the content in the course, without external resources, I would say there's at that rhythm, there's at least 2 months content there,
Yeah. 2 months.
8 hours
Yeah.
a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's too much thing like, and that is the course, not the mentoring sessions. If you
Yeah.
go through the mentoring sessions, then you'll have a whole new course there, or a few courses.
Yeah, because we kept adding these, and now there are many. Like I remember
Yeah,
when I joined, there were like maybe a few dozen. Now we have so many mentoring sessions. There's also a new course. Like there's a lot of material there, and keeps growing by the day, right? So,
yeah,
but on the bright side, you get more maybe more specialized content. So you have the main course that kind of um, focuses on the most important aspects, on the generic ones, and then if you need to deep dive into the specific one, then yeah, if you need to know about, I don't know, differable data sources, then there's a mentoring session for that.
yeah. Or if
Yeah,
you want to get a different point of view to see if you really understood some of the concepts, oh, let's see about coordinators, or let's see
yeah,
about a specific design pattern. How would I use coordinators for analytics? You'll have sessions for that. Although they are mentioned in the program, they are explained there, you'll see different use cases for some of them.
yeah. It's really powerful content. Yeah, I would go with maybe 2 months of what you said, because I think, yeah, if you start to explore all the open doors that you have, then yeah, it takes a lot longer. But also, I think doing it like you did it is unique and super powerful, because yeah, you were able to focus on learning, and you could also explore all these recommended articles and books, which give you, I'm, I'm assuming, and you tell me if I'm right, uh, give you this bigger perspective. Like it's one thing to, I don't know, mention a few clean architecture ideas, and it's another thing to just go and read the book. Or the same with TDD, right? There's so much depth on these topics. Then if you have the time then to explore it, you gain so much more in depth.
That's absolutely right. Um, One important note, that there's definitely a lot of value in going to the original source. So looking at the dependency injection book or looking at clean code. Uh, but I'm pretty sure that I didn't have the level to read those books when I joined the program. Like
Right.
if I if I just said, okay, yeah, I will learn about dependency injection on myself, reading this book on C sharp, there's both the programming language barrier, but a lot of the concepts wouldn't click.
Yeah.
So having a specific version, so let's talk about dependency injection in the iOS development ecosystem, you can get a better understanding. And if you want to get really deep, then you can look on
Right.
those other resources.
Right. But I guess that the course puts you in the right mindset, and it gives you like the information you need to be able to absorb that on a more depth level. It's like you said, otherwise if you try to do it on, it's not that you're not gonna understand it, but it's not gonna click, or you won't see it to the right lens.
Yeah, one thing that I remembered I discussed with some of the students in the community is exactly this click, and how can you make sure that you understood something? Because we watch some of the lessons and they make sense,
Yeah.
but when trying to apply to our day-to-day problem in our work environment, we are not in that level yet
Yeah.
sometimes. So yeah, how can I test this implementation that will use the image recognition framework from Apple? Which are the abstractions that I need to create? Which are the interfaces? So yeah, it gives you. I would not say it's just a basic understanding. The program gives you a good understanding, but maybe you will need to rewatch because you when you watched it, you didn't have a high enough level. So it's a continuous process. You will watch, you will get a little bit better, then you watch it again, you understand even more, then you read the book, and the next time you watch, you will understand even better.
Yeah. So you described kind of how your professional life was before joining the program. Now I want to bring this in the light of going through the program, and did you manage to get the responses you were looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. Major point is there is a way to write software in a way where you don't need to rewrite it. You can make it the couple that needs to change. Um, and I feel that the major difference is now I'm actually able to do it, and I'm able to teach others how to do it and why it is important. I actually had a conversation with another senior here at the company, and I was telling him, arguing that what he was proposing would not be it could work if we were dealing with an app that would last a year, but it could bite us in if we need to maintain it for a longer period of time. And the current app that I'm working is the company is completing 10 years, and there's still Objective C code there back from that time. Um, so now what I can do, and the feature I'm working on, I need to change behavior on an Objective-C class that I don't even know who wrote that code, and I don't really care because
Yeah.
I can test it. There are no tests for that component, unfortunately, but I can write the test for it before changing the behavior. And then I can be sure, okay, I can change it because I have the test suite backing that up. And then I can test drive my changes to guarantee that I'm not changing more than I need. It's a completely different mindset on development. You are uh, you shift from that thought that okay, I need to make it work, like delivering is the most important thing. That's how I use it to think. It's not that delivering is not important, but you need to deliver with quality. It's not, oh, let's do it in whatever way possible. No, let's do it with discipline. Let's do it in a way that we know we are delivering good quality software. Let's guarantee that everything is tested. We are treating the edge cases. We have different scenarios covered, and then there is no problem there. If there is something that needs change, a big change needs refactor, you can extract components. You learn techniques to deal with legacy code bases. Okay, how can I make this class testable? How can I guarantee that I'm injecting the correct dependencies, that I'm mocking what I need to mock in the test side, in a way that I guarantee that I'm not breaking things, and at the same time, I'm opening them for extension.
Yeah. I think that's very important. Like all the things, but especially this opening for extension, because I think it resolves that root thing we talked about earlier when I said, okay, we need to rewrite. Why did we need to rewrite? Because it wasn't extendable, right? Now, if you have that in mind and say, okay, how is my code in how is my architecture welcoming any changes? I mean, I know we're bad at anticipating what the changes will be, but there are some things which we do that are allowing, are more welcoming towards changes than others. So at least we do that. Like if we, for instance, need to retrieve data from an API, we at least think about, okay, should I maybe think about the future when we'll add caching or add some fallback logic here. So we separate some abstractions, like that is what gives us the flexibility in the future. It's like I think you also mentioned this when the whole view controller has everything, then there's no flexibility there. You cannot inject any behavior. You can just change it, but that breaks usually something else. So yeah, it's very
Absolutely.
powerful.
Yeah, if we think about the way that things use it to work, you usually think about a scenario where your view controller is making the API requests, or your view model is making the API requests, or your presenter is making the API requests, but usually directly, like it calls
Of
your
course.
singleton for the service or call your shared session, something like that, and calls it. And then if you need to implement caching, and now you need to display that view without the network request, you need to modify it.
Yeah.
But you didn't need to modify it. Like you could make it extendable, and yeah,
Yeah.
the major difference I think from before and after the course is understanding dependency injection, understanding that you can inject behavior, and it goes in a different level from what I think most people think about dependency injection. That's a discussion that I had a couple weeks ago. There's this misconception between dependency injection and DI containers. So when you talk about a tool that will do DI for you, and how many teams end up using DI containers as service locators. So
Yeah.
instead of injecting the dependencies, they are just locating, and then you have implicit dependencies, and that could be a problem. Um, so actually understanding that, oh, this class that I'm working, this type, this object should have one responsibility, and this other thing that I'm trying to add is another responsibility, so it should not live in the
Yeah.
same component.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond the acronyms that we use. Oh, like, oh, this is interactor, we should go in the Viper interactor box in this template. It's not it. Like sometimes it's not even sometimes. Most of the times you don't have a pattern that will solve your
Yeah.
problem. Like
Yeah.
there are some design patterns that you are used to solve very uh, some types of problems, but an architectural pattern that you can use in whatever application and it will be a silver bullet doesn't exist. So
Mhm.
there's no thing like, oh yeah, let's add this to the interactor and all our problems are solved. Uh, it, it's not like that. And when you understand, okay, I can inject a client, I can inject a loader, I can inject a mapper, I can inject a closure that will do something. I can create an abstract factory and inject
Yeah.
it. Uh, there is so much value when you understand that you don't have to put everything inside of your view controller or your view
Yeah.
model just because, oh, but it's related to the life cycle of the app, so it should go. No, it doesn't, and there's
Yeah.
a better way.
Yeah. I think it's just because we were brainwashed in a matter of saying, of fitting everything into a MV pattern, MVX pattern. So at first it was MVC, and if you, by the way, if you did a network request from a view controller, everybody agrees that's not okay. But the minute you move that request, same hard-coded dependency into a view model or presenter, most people will say that's okay. And we know I mean, it's debatable. Like it really depends on what you're trying to do. And but I think we're just lagging in learning these things, because now everybody says MVC is bad because it leads to massive view controller, but there's not a lot of I don't know, material book content on how the other patterns can go wrong. And the meaning, I think that's one of the most important transformation we saw in people, in students in the course, when they stop feeding everything in those patterns. They say, okay, I have a new responsibility. I need a component for that. I don't try to feed it into MV, B, C, D, or something. It can be its own thing, right? It's a anything you said, like it's a client. Okay, it should be a client component, whatever. You it's so much that moment is so important, because then you really start to do architecture, and it won't be perfect, because this is something that you learn all your life, and uh, the older you get, maybe the better you get. You see more scenarios, more use cases, and more patterns, and but it's that point where you actually start to do architecture instead of just putting everything in 3 files or 5 files, or and like, should the that code be in the view model or in the presenter? Like, no, it's probably neither. That thing. So that's inspiring. See people um, realize that, because nobody tells you these things. All the If you read, and a lot of people think they learn by reading articles and Medium or content and everything. Everybody talks about a new pattern, like why is MVP better than MVVM, and like, it doesn't matter. What we learn here is it doesn't matter. You can do MVC or any one of them just as easily, and the problems elsewhere. Um, like you said. So, and it's also about composition. I think when you learn that thing, that you can actually compose multiple small types instead of just making them as big as possible, that also changes on so many levels. I was talking to somebody um, earlier about having to spend a few hours on a git merge, um, because of course you're done with your feature, and then you have to integrate it, and somebody else worked on the same file, and if it's a big file, good luck fixing all that conflict. um, and nobody, like, you don't see a project manager or Scrum or any process count for that. Nobody cares about conflicts. It's like you should fix them, right? And they can really affect your productivity and everything. So there's so many lessons here that can definitely change the way you do software.
Yeah, I would just like to come back to a point that you said, that it's debatable, and definitely it is debatable. We could go forever with two very different point of views on what is over architecture and what isn't. Um, but and that's okay. Like, there are, as I said earlier, if your average span in a company is 6 months, then those things are probably not relevant. If you are building apps that will be discarded 1 year later, then those things are probably not relevant. I want to work in applications that will live for decades if possible. I
Yeah,
want to understand, and I want to contribute to things that will matter in the future. So,
yeah, because then you can really see the difference, if there is one, right? um,
absolutely. And I already saw that doing things the way I was used to doesn't work in the long run. So
yeah,
it's debatable, and it depends on what
yeah.
you want for your software, for the software you're developing for your craft.
Yeah, I agree. When I look at this problem, I try not to think about so whenever we review, let's say, an architecture or some design diagram or something, I'm not trying to, like, I know people can advocate for different solutions. What I try to think about as the main process in my mind is my architecture doing what's supposed to do, and that's let us express ourselves in code and have like a steady rhythm of delivering features over time. That's what should say if we made the right or the wrong decision. It doesn't matter if from an abstract point it's better this way, or if it's over or under architected, or if it has too many layers of abstraction. And what it boils down to is, can you write your features? Can you accommodate the use cases and the requirements with that? And is that working for you or against you? That's kind of the most important thing I say. And other than that, yeah, philosophical questions about architecture can go on and on and on. I've been in a few myself. It's interesting to see, at least, but yeah, it doesn't guarantee anything. So
Yeah,
you have to,
responding to change.
yeah,
That's what you
responding
should
to
be able to
change.
do.
And I think also adapting the architecture to the level of seniority in your team, because
Okay.
if people cannot understand and work with that, then you have a big problem. Like, the architecture can be amazing, it can be award winning. If the people on the team cannot use it, and they just keep making mistakes, then again you have a problem. So of course that can be resolved with training or anything, but it's important as a senior, as an architect, to take this into account.
Yeah. And as always, it depends.
Yeah.
I think that is the default answer from any
Exactly.
senior engineer. It
Exactly.
depends.
We had that joke, right? If you're a senior, you usually ask a very long question, and the answer is it depends.
Yeah. There's also the difference on how different seniority levels ask questions. You
Yes.
will usually see a junior asking for, hey, what's the best way of doing X?
Yeah.
And a senior will ask something like, hey, I'm trying to do X. I've come up with these two solutions, and this is the trade-off between them. Am I missing something?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Any suggestions? That's it.
And the other ones, which one is better, MVP or MVVM?
Yeah, what's the best? That's
Yeah.
the junior level question. Like it depends.
Yeah.
Depends what you are trying to achieve.
Those are all very insightful things, that trying to follow on our path in this conversation. So I want to talk briefly about this very big opportunity and change in your career. You got being offered a job abroad with relocation and with a big income increase. Can you tell us a bit about that? How do your life change? How do you first, how do you get that offer, and maybe detail a bit?
Absolutely. As I said, I was looking for an opportunity abroad, and I I have family here in Germany. I have my brother who came here, so it was my main target. And after joining the program, after studying a lot, after answering a lot of questions, and really building the confidence that I know what I'm talking about, I had a one of my I talked about the engineer on my team that I couldn't talk with him about dependency injection in the same level.
Yeah.
He's working in the same company. He referred me, so now he and the company is international, so they have offices in Brazil, also in Germany and a few other countries. And he referred to join his team, and it was one of the best experiences in a recruitment process because I really felt okay. I know what I'm talking about. It's not like, oh, I'm dribbling the questions and answering it depends. And no, it's actually understanding and seeing that, okay, this company also cares about code quality. They also follow the principles that I believe are important. Uh, During all the the steps in the interviewing process, the take-home test, the technical interview. I could do a lot. Uh, I used Swizzling for testing in the take-home test, just because I didn't need to change something, but I wanted to test it. And it's a completely different mindset of if I were to take that process a couple months before. So yeah, I got a really good review in my interviews, and I got the offer to join the Brazilian office. And while the visa paperwork was going, they sponsored my visa and the relocation for me and my family. And I moved to Berlin a couple months later. And yeah, talking about how my life changed is completely different. Like, at least talking about Berlin, Berlin is an amazing place to raise your a kid. Like, you have parks every 5 minutes, even
Yeah.
less than that. We also brought our dog here. Um, yeah. And also, it's my first experience in English, so working with a international team, really diverse, using English as the day-to-day language in work, and your mindset changes. So it's not like, oh, I'm the iOS engineer. I get the tasks that need to be done, and I implement them, and that's it. No, uh, you are an engineer. You help build the solutions. You take part into the discussions. You can talk about architecture with the Android engineers and talk about dependency injection. You can uh, delve in the backend tickets, understand what's happening, cover for someone if needed. Yeah, so regarding the life transformation, there is the whole relocation, moving to Europe, bringing family here, but there's also joining a nice company. Like, people here really care about work-life balance. They also care about code quality. And I might be biased because I'm really enjoying working for this company, but I really feel people are they personally care about their colleagues. Although it's not a small company, we are talking over 2,000 employees, I believe over 3,000 already. Uh, yeah, the culture here is amazing. Yeah.
Nice. Actually, I've been to Berlin a few times. I also like the city a lot. I was working with a company that has offices there. I also think it's a great opportunity for your kid as well.
Absolutely.
And how did the discussion between your friend and his boss went like?
He knew that I left the company to study, and we had some discussions. We even started to discuss some ideas on some apps that we wanted to develop in our personal time. And he saw that my level changed. Like, we could talk about, oh yeah, let's do it with Kotlin multi-platform. We just define the interfaces, and I can reuse part of your code. He's an Android developer. So yeah, things change. He knew that, and he referred me without, like, being honest. Like, he already knew that I was capable of delivering, even if not with that much quality at the time. And then I took the next step to actually deliver good code. Like, there is one thing that I used it to say back in game development. That's how I feel things work in the gaming industry. It's first you make things work, then you make them work right, and lastly you make them work good. So it's changing that the way you approach the task. So yeah, I could deliver things, and now I can deliver the right thing, and I can deliver it right.
Right. Nice. And you took the program's experience when still being in Brazil, and perhaps that's the different software conditions than Germany and Europe. I know I probably felt the same taking the course from Romania, and then when I started to work with clients and everything, and I guess that's also what you found is you validated all that you learned. Yeah, those guys do it like that. It's applicable. It really works. So it's a good confidence booster when you see that happening.
Yeah, a comment on that line is I believe many of us had the excuse of, oh, I don't write tests because my manager doesn't give me enough time.
Yeah.
Well, now my manager will uh, call my attention if I don't write tests. Like that's not an option
Yeah,
to deliver something without test coverage.
that's great. I mean, I'm sure you're already sold on testing, but maybe at the point where you're not, this really helps if somebody enforces some standards on the team. So yeah,
Yeah.
about that, let's maybe summarize what some of the main takeaways you got from the program, like what you think are the most important techniques or principles you got on your tool belt now.
Yeah, I would have to go with the classics. So TDD, being able to test drive an implementation, but also not just TDD in the by the book definition of, oh yeah, let's write a test while we develop, but uh, getting that mindset that you need to have tests if you want to make a change to something.
Right.
Like if you are changing code that's not tested, the time that you have to spend testing manually is not worth it. The amount of times you have to run the app, navigate to somewhere and do something, it's not worth it. And
Yeah.
if it's legacy code that you didn't build a week ago and you don't know how it works, the chances that you are breaking something are too high. So writing the test before changing something, before adding or modifying behavior is really important. After that, or maybe even more important, is dependency injection. Actually understanding how to inject, understanding the concept of a composition route and where you will compose the behavior. Like we are talking about adding behavior, adding different components, making this collaboration, asking if something should live in a class. But we never talk about, okay, so where do I do it? I know I cannot put it in the view controller, but how am I instantiating that view controller? Where do I inject the dependencies? How do I do it? Knowing that part of dependency injection is really important and really changes how you build software. Solid principles, they will guide on how to understand if something should live or not into a component, if you should extract it and how. So if you're talking about single responsibility principle, that should guide you to understand if you should have a separate component. And if you should have a separate component, how would you do it? Dependency inversion. You'll have also, we talked briefly here about open for extension, closed for
Open close
modification.
principle. Yeah.
So yeah, there are a lot of principles that you can follow, and they will lead to better code, testable code, decoupled, easy to change. And a lot of that, I would recommend reading the books on those subjects, understanding the principle, understanding the core of what is being taught there and why it's important.
Can you think of an example, like a concrete example from your experience where applying these principles, these techniques, like TDD, solid, and more, like CI/CD? There's many things which we advocate for. helped you or your team? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I was reviewing a pull request from another team, actually. It was not from my squad nor tribe. And the guys were working in a registration flow. You had to give your information. And now, in one of the screens where we were asking for the user's family name and first name, now we also had to ask for citizenship information. And the way it was implemented was, let's add citizenship inside of the name screen. And it's weird. Like, I saw that and I said, this is an amazing opportunity to talk about some patterns. So instead of modifying the name step in our flow, we could composite it. We could use the composite pattern and not change the name, create a citizenship step, create a composite between them, and use that in our screen. And
nice.
what's the advantage of that? If we need to change the order later, let's say citizenship moves to another screen or moves to its own screen, or we are changing it to the address or whatever, we have the citizenship developed in isolation. We can use it as a step. And we have a composite developed in isolation that we can compose any number of steps. So it really, in the end, I think we had around the same number of lines of code, if you care about that. But we could, it was really easy to iterate on if we wanted to show citizenship or not. There's also the extra complexity on that task because for some markets, we did not want to ask for citizenship. So now you have a class called name and citizenship with an if to not show citizenship.
Exactly.
And now you just add an if condition when you create the composite. If you don't want to display the citizenship, you don't create the composite. And
Exactly.
that's it.
The other big advantage is you never probably touched the name step.
Exactly.
So didn't break that one.
Exactly. And we are
Excellent.
pretty sure that if we are not displaying the citizenship, everything works as the same as before because we didn't change those components.
Great example. And you can scale that very well in the future if you need to add another field, and it's fine. Just
Exactly.
compose it again instead of adding another if and maybe two booleans now that drive your whole form. So yeah, very nice. And some people would say maybe that's again, they can argue about over architecting or something, but at the end of the day, all these small decisions add up and they can take your code base to different places depending on when you decide to apply them. And it's all about these small details. Like it's not some big change that you made at some point. It's every incremental change you make with your design. Yeah, I just want to like ask you one more question. What's your advice for the people watching us that are looking to enhance their careers, to learn, to get better jobs, to maybe get to move to other countries? What do you think they
Okay.
should do?
Okay. Talking about my personal experience and the what I lived in Brazil, I know it's possible to have a long career and have some level of success without some of the basics. So without knowing how to write tests, and it's common at least in Brazil. So you will see that senior engineer with 10 years experience that doesn't know how to test a view controller, doesn't know how to test sometimes even a service, doesn't know how to test your networking without performing network requests so they are not flaky. It happens and you can have that career. But if you want to go after better companies, after better compensation or other markets, you need to step your game up. So you need to learn those things. So if you are in that situation where you don't know how to write tests, you don't know how to test drive your implementation, and there are people who will say TDD doesn't work, and fair if you believe in that. But think about all the times that you are changing something in a UI view controller. You change a constraint and it's view code, so you need to run the app, navigate through 4 or 5 screens to see if it's right. Try to add that time up, and imagine if you had an instantaneous way of guaranteeing that it worked. If you could test that development in isolation, how much time you would save. And here I would say believe, if you are not there yet, but believe that you can save a lot of time by writing tests. And you'll also save time in the future because you will have fewer regressions. So if you don't know how to write tests, or you are not comfortable enough to test everything that you do, focus on that. Like, that is really important. And to do that, you will have to learn all the other concepts. You will need to learn how to make your components testable. You will need to learn how to inject dependencies through testing. And testing is something that you will be asked if you want to join a big company, if you want to get a nice position somewhere.
Yeah, that's very good advice, because I like how you structured it. Like it's mainly testing, but in order to do testing, you have to learn all these other things like dependency injection and single responsibility principle and dry and all that, all the things that come with it. So it's yeah, I like that. It has kind of a structure. Nice.
Yeah. And it saves time, not
Totally.
only in the long run. Like, it's not just because you want to have regressions. It will save time during your sprint. If you
Yeah.
get good at writing tests, it will be faster than just making it work.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, sometimes people don't realize on what they waste their times. I know I recently I was helping a team with some project and reviewing what they do, and I noticed that to run, like you said, to go to a screen and check something, they had to log in because the requirements were in such a way they couldn't save using password. So every time they run the app, they log in, then navigate to, I don't know, 10 screens or something, because it was an application that was running a flow every time. So it took like 30, 40 seconds every time just to get to that screen and say, doesn't work. So stop the debugger, change some work code, do that again. And I was watching and it's like, he can't be doing that every time. And he was. And it's like, okay, did you ever think? It's like, no, I didn't think about that, because I mean, what's to think? Like, I need to go to that screen and that's the only way to go. So it's amazing. Like, and sometimes you're caught in that loop that you don't think about these things, but then you say, oh, but I don't have the time to write the tests. The same test maybe that would just guarantee that behavior. And yeah, so really, really good insight.
And in that scenario, you cannot develop if the API is down.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that doesn't make sense if you think about it. Like, oh, I cannot work on iOS development because the network is not working.
I
It
I, I
should
also
not.
remember that, like, when I was working with some company, and we had developers say, I cannot work on the feature because the API is not ready. I just cannot. Uh, or like I said, the API is not working today, so that's it. I can't do my job. And how silly does that sound right now? When you know that, okay, you just need to decouple from that flaky dependency and just put an abstraction in place which you can mock or whatever, use a dumb implementation for development, and that's it. You can do everything you need to. It's so
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah, and then you develop trust in your tests and in your test suite, and it changes the way you develop code. Like it doesn't
Yeah,
matter if the API is not ready or it's not
yeah,
working. I know my code works because I have the tests backing that claim. When I plug it, it will work. Unless, obviously, if the API contract is wrong,
is
the API is not working. But that is then, that's after development.
yeah,
Like you were not stuck during that time. And that's
yeah,
time that you save. Like
exactly.
there's a lot of time to be saved with tests.
Yeah. You test it with layering your code, because even if that happens and you see, okay, my my client does not use the same contract as the API, it's very easy to find and fix the differences because you have that small layer in between. It's not spilling all over the code, and now I have to change because they need change the name of the parameter. I have to go in 20 classes and
I'll have
change
to
that.
change it in
Yeah.
core data because of
Exactly. Change
caching.
it. Exactly.
It
So
happens depending on how coupled things are. You might need to propagate those changes to caching, and
yeah,
you don't have to do that. There are better ways.
yeah. And again, small, very small decision, but how many hours will it end up saving in the whole history of the project? So I think seniority and all these super principles come down to simplicity. Like if you look at a, an ideal code base for us, it would be very simple. It's like the essential feed code base. It's very simple. Like you look at every item in there and it's so simple. Like say, but yeah, this doesn't apply to real project because real projects are more complicated and it's actually not. Like that's the art of being a good architect, is just simplifying things to the point where everybody could understand them.
Yeah. Oh, the project I'm working is too complex. Okay. Now you need to change a behavior, extract that into a single component into it, and it will
Yeah,
be simple. If
yeah,
it's not simple, it's doing too much.
yeah, yeah,
If you have a lot of simple components, your project can still be big with a lot of modules, a lot of features, but composed of easy to change, decoupled, and small components.
yeah. That's it. That's the dream, and it's possible. All right. Thank you so much, Penna, for being open, for sharing your story. It was really insightful conversation.
Thank you for this amazing conversation. It was really nice being here.
Yeah. For the people watching us, if you want to learn more, just visit us at essentialdeveloper.com. There you can find a bunch of free resources to improve your iOS developer skills. And you can also find us on the social channels, YouTube, Twitter, and so on. Thanks, everyone, and see you soon.